Do you know that feeling when your phone lights up and you already know who it is before you even look? Not because they're consistent, but because they're consistent in one specific way. They only show up when their life is falling apart. And it's always the same time, too. Late, quiet, convenient for them, inconvenient for you. And what's scary is how fast your body responds. Your stomach drops like you're being summoned. Your brain switches into caretaker mode like it's a reflex. You tell yourself, maybe this time it's going to be different. You tell yourself, they're reaching out because they trust me. Or they're going through a lot. And sure, maybe they are. But you need to hear this without sugarcoating, because it's going to save you months of your life. They are using you. And I know how aggressive that sounds. I know it sounds like I'm accusing them of being evil, like they're sitting in a dark room, twirling their mustache, plotting on how to manipulate you. Most of the time, it's not like that. Most of the time, it's much simpler. Maybe they're selfish. Maybe they're emotionally immature. Maybe they're scared of being alone. And they've learned that you'll always be there to patch the hole. So they keep you close enough to benefit, but far enough to avoid having responsibility. And you call it a connection. I want to start with a story. There was a period of my life where I was basically a 24/7 customer support line. Not for a company, but for a person. Every time they had a bad day, I was the first call. Every time they felt anxious, I was the relief. Every time they got bored, I was the entertainment for them. Every time their other options didn't work out, I was the backup plan, and it started feeling to me like it was fate. And I honestly took pride in it at first. That's the embarrassing part. I felt important. I felt needed. I felt like I was the stable person in someone else's chaotic life. And that made me feel valuable. I thought being chosen in moments of pain meant that I was special. I thought being the one they can talk to meant that something deeper was building. But nothing was building. I was just being drained. It was like pouring water into a cup with a crack in the bottom and then blaming myself for why the cup never stayed full. And the day it hit me was so small, which is always how these realizations come. They don't show up with dramatic music. They show up in a tiny moment that you just can't unsee. I'd had a terrible day, like one of those days where you feel heavy in your chest and you don't want to talk about it to anyone, but you also don't want to be alone. You just want a person. So I did what they always did to me. I reached out, not with a big paragraph or with a guilt trip, but just a simple message. I said, "Can we talk tonight? I'm not doing great." And I remember staring at my screen like it was going to answer back. But hours went by and nothing. And then later that night, I saw them posting, laughing, out with friends, with plenty of energy. They weren't dying, they weren't in a crisis. They just didn't need me. And that was the moment my brain finally connected the dots. I wasn't a person in their life. I was a tool, a service, an emotional resource they could tap into whenever the vibe was off. And the worst part is, I had trained them to treat me that way. Because I never made it expensive. I never made it require respect. I never even made it require reciprocation. I made it easy and unlimited. I made myself available and in a way that looked like love and felt like love, but was really self-abandonment. And that's what being used looks like in relationships. Not always screaming, not always obvious disrespect. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's wrapped in compliments and late night vulnerability and "you're the only person who gets me." Do you want to know one of the most dangerous sentences you can hear? You're the only person who gets me. Because it sounds romantic. It sounds like you've been chosen. But most of the time, it's just a clever way of making you responsible for someone else's emotional stability. It's a sentence that puts you on the hook. Now you feel like leaving them would be cruel, and you're not like that. Now you feel like setting boundaries would be selfish. Now you feel like you have to stay because you're the special one. And the moment that you accept that role, your life starts orbiting around them. You start waiting. You start anticipating. You start editing yourself and changing your schedule and what even you want, just so you don't upset the dynamic. You start wondering what you did wrong when they disappear, even when it was entirely on them. And you start tolerating things that you would never even tell your best friend to tolerate, never mind yourself. Because you're not thinking like a protector anymore, you're thinking like a negotiator. You're negotiating your dignity just to feel a little bit closer to them. And a feeling of closeness that has to be negotiated is never going to feel safe. The reason this topic matters so much is because being used doesn't just waste your time. It rewires the entire way that you love in the first place. It trains you to associate love with chasing. It trains you to associate intimacy with inconsistency. It trains you to believe that you have to earn basic decency. And once you learn that pattern, you start repeating it with different people, in different outfits, with different names. So let's talk about what using actually looks like in relationships without turning it into some sort of TED Talk. Because you already know. Your body already knows. You feel it. You feel it when you're always the one adjusting, when plans exist only if you make them. You feel it when they disappear for days and come back with softness and an excuse, and you just forgive them because you were missing them. You feel it when they say all the right things, but their actions stay the same. And you especially feel it when you try to bring it up. And that's where the truth leaks out, because someone who respects you will care that you feel used, even if they didn't intend to do it. They'll pause, they'll listen, they'll think about how they could have done better, they'll reflect on it, they'll want to fix it because you matter to them. Someone who is using you will treat your feelings like it's an inconvenience. They'll flip it on you, they'll make you feel dramatic. They'll start talking like a lawyer, they'll start auditing your tone, your timing, your wording. They'll turn your pain into a debate. And you'll leave the conversation feeling guilty that you even brought it up, feeling guilty for even having emotions in the first place. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a complete imbalance in a power of a relationship. Now I want to zoom in on a hard truth that people avoid. Sometimes being used isn't only about them. It's about the deal that you secretly agreed to. And I'm going to say this the best I can because I've been there. Some of you agreed to be used because you thought it was the closest thing to love that you could get out of them. You didn't say it out loud, but your actions did. You accepted half effort because full effort felt completely unrealistic. You started accepting crumbs because you're starving. You accepted being convenient because being cherished and being loved by them felt way too far away. And if you grew up having to earn attention, earn approval, earn peace in your own home, you're going to unconsciously recreate that dynamic in dating. You'll find people who will make you work because working for love is all you've ever known. Your nervous system loves familiar pain. Familiar pain feels controllable. But peace feels unfamiliar and feels suspicious. So you pick someone who keeps you slightly anxious because at least anxiety feels like something's happening. At least you feel something. And that's how people end up in situationships that go nowhere for a year and then disappear. That's how people end up being someone's almost. That's how people end up being a secret and somehow being okay with it. That's how people end up being the person someone vents to after they get rejected by the person they actually wanted. And I know that one stings because you don't want to admit you've been placed in the comfort category while someone else gets the commitment category. But it happens all the time. Not because you're not worthy, but because you've kept accepting the role. And people will treat you how you allow them to treat you. That sentence used to make me feel angry because it felt like blame. But now I see it as more as power, because if I'm allowed to, I can stop allowing it. And if you stop allowing it, you'll start seeing people's true intentions very quickly. Here's how you can tell someone is using you without spying, without guessing, without becoming paranoid. You can change one thing. You stop being endlessly accessible. You stop being the immediate solution. You stop being the emotional sponge. You make yourself slightly less convenient, and then you watch what happens. Not out of bitterness, but out of a way that lets you see it more clearly. Because if they only wanted you when you're easy to consume, they don't want you. They want you to provide. And you must be thinking, okay, but what if I do that and they leave? Well, then you have your answer. And I know that sounds brutal, but I'd rather you have a brutal answer than a soft lie that's going to cost you another year. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They think leaving means that they failed. They think that if they get left, that means they didn't try hard enough. They think that if they were more attractive, more fun, more chill, more interesting, more low maintenance, more whatever, then the person would finally choose them. So they keep upgrading themselves for someone who benefits either way. If you improve, well, they benefit, but if you stay the same, then they also benefit. They're not invested in you or your peace. They're invested in your availability and what you can do for them. And availability feels like love to them because it keeps them comfortable. But comfort isn't the same as care. I want to give you another story. I had a friend who was in this loop with someone, the classic loop. They'd talk intensely for a week, they'd get close, they'd hang out a bunch, and then the other person would go cold. And my friend would completely spiral. They'd write paragraphs, they'd overthink, they'd blame themselves, and the person would come back with some excuse, something vague, something emotional, and my friend would just instantly forgive them. And I watched this happen over and over, like I was watching someone keep touching a stove because they liked how warm it let them feel for a second, even though the burn lasted all week. And one day I asked my friend, "What do you think they get from you?" And they said, "Nothing, I'm not giving them anything." That's what people say when they're in it. They think using only counts if money is involved or if someone is constantly asking for favors. But using in relationships is, most of the time, emotional. It's attention, it's validation, it's intimacy without commitment, it's a free therapist, it's someone to fill the silence when the real option is unavailable, it's someone to keep around just so they don't feel unwanted. And then I asked my friend a different question. When you stop replying, what happens? And my friend said, "Oh, they freak out. They go crazy." There it is. This is what so many people don't realize, but it's the truth. They didn't freak out because they were losing love. They freaked out because they were losing access to comfort, access to attention, because if someone actually loved you, they'd do the same thing that you do. They would second guess themselves. They would put up with a little bit of less attention because they respect you. But if all that they're doing is wanting your attention, and in the moment that they don't have it, they freak out, they don't actually love you. They just love the access that you've given to them. Access to being wanted without having to earn it. If you ever had someone treat you like you're disposable until you pull away, and then suddenly you're the most important person in your life, that isn't romance. That's more of, it's like resource management. They're managing the supply. They're keeping you warm enough to stay, but cold enough to never get too close. And if you accept that for long enough, your self-esteem just completely turns to dust, because deep down, you know you're being handled. You know you're being managed. You know that you're being kept. And you start asking yourself questions that poison your mind. Why am I not enough? Why do they treat me like this? Why do I keep coming back? And you start building a belief that love is something that you have to chase. And that belief will ruin your future relationships, even with good people. Because once you've been used, real love can feel boring at first. Real love can feel too calm. It can feel suspicious because there's no roller coaster of emotions. And you find yourself missing the intensity. Not because intensity is better, but because you've gotten addicted to that cycle. So I want you to catch this early. Not with anger, but rather with honesty, and ask yourself, do they show up when there's nothing to gain for them? Do they check in when you're not providing something? Do they celebrate your goals and your achievements when it doesn't directly benefit them? Do they respect your no? Because someone can be sweet and lovely and still use you. Someone can be charming and still use you. Someone can be physically affectionate and still use you. Using doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like comfort with no responsibility. Sometimes it looks like you being someone's favorite person, but they keep their eyes on the door in case something else better comes. Now I want to talk about a specific type of using that people rarely admit, but it happens all the time. Being used as practice. Some people date you like your training wheels. They get to learn how to be a better partner with you because you're safe and forgiving and patient and understanding. And then once they've built confidence, once they've healed a little, once they've leveled up, they'll go and give the improved version of themselves to someone else. And you're sitting there thinking, so I was just a stepping stone? Sometimes, yeah. And if you're hearing this and that makes your stomach sink, good, because that sinking feeling is your intuition waking up. You're not crazy for feeling used. You're not dramatic, no matter what they tell you. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for the bare minimum. Mutual effort, mutual care, mutual respect. And if someone can't even give you that, sure, they can still be a good person. They're just not your person. But you'll never meet your person if you keep letting the wrong person rent space in your life. You'll never have the room. You'll never have energy. You'll never have the emotional bandwidth, because being used is exhausting. It turns your love into work. It turns your love into labor, into a job. You start working shifts, you start working overtime, and you don't even get paid for it. You get anxiety as compensation. And then you normalize it because it becomes your routine. That's why people stay, because routine is powerful. Even a painful routine can feel safer than no routine. Because change forces you to face the quiet parts of yourself. Change forces you to face yourself. It forces you to face the truth that you tolerated something that you didn't even deserve. And that truth can hurt. But in the long run, it heals you. Because once you accept it, you can stop. So what do you do when you realize they're using you? You stop trying to convince them to see your value. People who are using you already see your value. That's why they keep coming back. They just don't respect it enough to protect it. So stop performing. Stop over-explaining everything. Stop writing paragraphs that try to translate your humanity into something that they'll finally understand, because they already understand. They just prefer the arrangement that benefits them the most. And if you want to break that arrangement, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. Because the moment you stop being useful, people who use you tend to rewrite the story anyway. They'll say you changed. They'll say you're cold. They'll say you're selfish or you're being too dramatic. They'll say you're doing too much. And I think you should let them. You're not on Earth to be convenient. You're not here on Earth to be kept in a hidden pocket for the nights they feel lonely. You're here to be loved out loud. You're here to be chosen clearly. You're here to be respected consistently, not just when they feel like it. So the shift that you need is simple, but it takes courage. You stop offering access to you without proof that they care. And proof isn't words, it's behavior. It's consistency. It's them showing up when it's not convenient. It's them making space for you in their real life, not just in their lonely moments. It's them responding to your needs without turning it into a negotiation about, oh, I've done this for you, now you can do this for me. And when you start living this way, you are going to lose some people. You are. But you're not losing love. You're losing customers. And yes, it's going to feel lonely for a bit. Because you've gotten used to the noise. You've gotten used to the dopamine of their attention. You've gotten used to the cycle. You've gotten used to being wanted in bursts. But once you detox from that, something beautiful happens. You start hearing yourself again. You start remembering what your own peace feels like. You start realizing how much energy you were spending just to stay in someone else's life. And then now you get to redirect that energy into your friends who actually care and actually show up, into your family and your goals and your health and your future partner, into the kind of person that you want to become. And that's the part people don't talk about. Leaving a dynamic where you're being used doesn't just protect you. It upgrades your entire life. Because you stop leaking this energy, you stop bleeding attention. You stop giving your best to someone who treats it like an infinite resource. There's one more uncomfortable angle that I think I should talk about, and it's probably the most taboo and the one that not a lot of people will talk about. Sometimes you're being used because you keep offering yourself as a solution. You try to heal people. You try to rescue people. You try to prove that you're lovable by being useful. And when you do this, you're going to attract people who are always in a crisis. They don't want stability. They want a high. And then you become the person who supplies that. So you need to ask yourself something that's hard, but it will change your life. Why do I feel drawn to people who need saving? Why do I feel more valuable when I'm needed than simply when I'm loved for who I am? Why do I confuse anxiety with intimacy? Why do I even tolerate inconsistency? Those questions aren't meant to shame you, they're meant to free you. Because if you can answer them honestly, you stop repeating the pattern. And then the next time someone tries to use you, it doesn't even last long enough to become a story. It ends at the first sign, at the first boundary test, at the first disrespect, at the first time they only show up when they want something and not when you need something. And that's where you want to get. Not cold, but clear, because being clear is kindness to yourself. And the person who's meant for you will not be offended by clarity. They'll appreciate it. They'll feel safe with you. They'll respect you more because you respect you. So if you're listening to this and you've felt that pit in your stomach this entire time because you can think of a name right now, I want you to do one thing today. Don't write them a paragraph or a novel. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to make them understand. Just reclaim one small piece of your life. Delay the reply for a bit. Say no to the 15th favor. Stop being available on demand. And see what happens. If they respect it, then there might be hope. There might be hope. But if they punish you for it, then there's your answer. And if you're at the point where you already know you don't even need to do what I just said, and you're just scared to do it, I'll say this gently. The longer you stay in a dynamic where you're being used, the harder it becomes to trust your own judgment, because you start doubting yourself, you start ignoring your instincts, and you start bargaining with your own boundaries. And you don't want to become the kind of person who can't protect themselves. You deserve to feel safe in your relationships. You deserve to feel like your love is received, not exploited. You start to feel chosen without having to audition. So, be brave enough to disappoint someone who benefits from your silence. Be brave to walk away from access that costs you your dignity. Be brave enough to let loneliness of change lead you into the peace of self-respect. Because the most painful part of being used isn't what they did, it's what it teaches you to believe about yourself. And you don't have to carry that belief anymore. You can drop it. You can choose a new standard. You can choose relationships where love is mutual and consistent and your presence is actually valued by the other person. And if you've never felt that before, I know it sounds like a fantasy, but it exists. You just can't find it while you're busy being someone else's resource. So choose yourself. Not in a dramatic way, but just in a way that respects your self-respect, in a way that protects your future, in the way that makes room for real love. And if you've made it this far and you want to try something new, like leaving the person who doesn't respect you for who you are, just know, I believe in you. You've got this. Have a good day.